Hello and welcome to our afternoon edition of Arirang News, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Kwon Jang-won, and it's good to have you with us. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will be visiting North Korea again this Sunday. And if it all goes to plan, he'll also be meeting with Kim Jong-un. As well as setting up a second summit between Kim and President Trump, Pompeo will be tasked with making progress on the regime's denuclearization. But what will that look like? We'll try to explore that further later in the show. But first, we catch up with the latest headlines by turning to Devin Whiting at the News Centre. What have you got for us, Devin?
Hi, Jung-ho. Well, President Jae-in today attended the opening of a new semiconductor plant built by chip giant SK Hynix. And there he promised once again to tackle the nation's unemployment crisis. Our Blue House correspondent Hwang Ho-jun reports.
At a ceremony celebrating the launch of a new plant by SK Hynix, South Korea's #2 chipmaker, President Moon Jae-in highlighted his policies for job creation and innovative growth. The president congratulated the company, saying the new plant will benefit both the local and national economies. He underscored that the new plant will hire more than 2,000 employees by the year 2020 and commended SK Hynix on its efforts to create a cooperative environment between large and small businesses as well as between business and local government.
투자하고 일자리를 만들고 중소기업과 상생하며 지역 경제에 기여하는 기업에 대하여 격려와 지원을 아끼지 않을 것입니다.
This was the fourth time President Moon has made a site visit to a major Korean company since taking office. Most recently, he visited the opening of Samsung Electronics' new factory in Noida, India last July. After Thursday's ceremony, President Moon chaired the 8th meeting of the Presidential Commission on Job Creation held on site at the SK Hynix plant. He pledged all-out efforts by the government to create more jobs and stressed that his administration has been doing its best to raise the nation's low employment rate. He cited systematic factors that have hampered those efforts, such as changes in industrial structures, automation, and the restructuring of major industries. And to overcome those conditions, he said the government must focus on revitalizing local companies and encouraging them to investment and create jobs. He also vowed to work with local companies to create new growth engines through new business projects, calling it a breakthrough solution for the nation's employment crisis. The president also urged the government to support such projects as well as to eliminate unnecessary regulations to cultivate new industries. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
And at that same meeting at the Hynix plant, the Presidential Committee on Jobs announced the government's plans to nurture 5 key industries that it hopes will boost job creation and strengthen the competitiveness of the manufacturing sector. The plan will see massive investment by private companies, supported by the government cutting red tape and helping with infrastructure. Kim Hae-sung has the details.
Autos, semiconductors, IoT home appliances, energy, bio, and health. These are the 5 key industries that the government plans to nurture as a way to strengthen Korea's manufacturing sector and create up to 107,000 jobs by 2022. In the auto sector, companies will invest $4.4 billion to develop electric, hydrogen, and driverless cars and build battery stations. The investment is expected to create 4,600 jobs. The government vowed to support auto companies through an increase in car subsidies. As for semiconductors and displays, the main driver of Korea's exports, companies will invest $85 billion in 15 projects that include expansion of semiconductor factory lines to develop more efficient next-generation semiconductors. In Internet of Things home appliances, companies will invest in 9 projects that include the development of IoT platforms and testbeds. To help support such private sector investment, the Presidential Committee on Jobs said the government will provide customized support through speeding up license approvals, improving infrastructure, and easing regulations. Such measures come amid sluggish job growth, with unemployment hitting an 8-year high of 4.2% in August.
Investment in driverless cars and next-generation semiconductors. This is a move in the right direction given the sluggish traditional manufacturing industries like shipbuilding. But for it to actually succeed in the long run, it needs to be more detailed and should nurture talents. Investment in basic science, not just R&D in commercialized science, would be key.
Of the 5 sectors, energy and biohealth were selected as new industries to invest in. There are around 70 projects in energy, including the nurturing of renewables and smart energy. In biohealth, the government plans to establish a big data system to help accelerate innovation by pharmaceutical and medical device companies, and said details will be announced later this year. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
11 years ago today, the two Koreas held their second ever summit, resulting in the October 4th declaration. And to celebrate the anniversary, 160 South Koreans are in the North Korean capital for a joint event. Before leaving, the delegates said they were looking forward to an historic visit. Oh Jung-hee tells us more.
For the first time in 10 years, South and North Korea are holding a joint event together in the North Korean capital. It's to celebrate the 11th anniversary of the October 4th declaration adopted in 2007 by South Korea's late former President Roh Moo-hyun and North Korea's then leader Kim Jong-il. But this trip is even more meaningful than the past ones as it involves South Koreans from all walks of life.
This is a trip not only by government officials but also members of the National Assembly, political parties, regional bodies, and civic groups. We will make this an opportunity to further solidify reconciliation, cooperation, and peace between the two Koreas.
Seoul's delegation is co-led by the Unification Minister Cho Myung-kyun and Lee Hae-chan, chairman of the Roh Moo-hyun Foundation and the leader of the ruling Democratic Party. The Roh Moo-hyun Foundation was set up to commemorate the late former president. Roh's son, Roh Gun-ho, is also traveling to Pyeongyang, which draws attention to whether the sons of the leaders that adopted the declaration, Roh himself and Kim Jong-un, could exchange greetings.
Inter-Korean relations have reached a historic phase. We are seeing some opportunities that can't be missed. I think former President Roh will appreciate the efforts by many, especially the devotion shown by President Moon Jae-in.
The joint celebratory event will be held on Friday at People's Culture Palace in Pyeongyang. But besides attending that event, the South Korean delegation will be touring some key spots in Pyeongyang, watching North Korean performances, and most importantly, meeting their North Korean counterparts for talks.
I expect we will discuss the schedules for other inter-Korean talks and how to follow up on and implement the Pyeongyang Joint Declaration.
It's expected the Unification Minister could meet Lee Sun-kwon, the chairman of the North's Reunification Committee, for high-level talks. Seoul's Vice Health Minister and Cultural Heritage Administrator are also joining the delegation, which means they too could meet their counterparts to discuss medical and cultural cooperation. But it remains to be seen whether the South Korean delegation will meet North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Now, this year has seen several more key agreements between the two Koreas on things like reducing tensions on the border and even a joint bid for the Olympics. Our Choi Si-young looks at what was in that first agreement reached in Pyongyang in 2007.
In October 2007, South Korea's then President Roh Moo-hyun made a three-day trip to Pyongyang for a summit with North Korea's then leader Kim Jong-il. Their meeting led to the second inter-Korean summit agreement, the October 4th Declaration. The date that they adopted the declaration has become another major shared anniversary for the two Koreas, in addition to June 15th, the 2000 summit agreement date, and August 15th, the National Liberation Day. The October 4th declaration stipulated that the two Koreas build trust, end military hostilities, and work towards permanent peace. It also mentioned expanding economic cooperation and exchanges in fields from science to culture, as well as dealing with humanitarian issues like holding reunions for war-torn families. But after the Roh Moo-hyun administration, Seoul went through 2 consecutive terms of conservative presidents and 10 years of icy relations with the North. Marking October 4th together is one of the steps agreed on at the latest September summit. Delegations from South and North Korea, not only from the government but from all corners of society, will attend the event on Friday. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will be heading to Asia this weekend, stopping by in Pyongyang to meet with Kim Jong-un. He's saying he's optimistic that this visit will lay the groundwork for a second summit between the leaders of the two sides. But whether that comes with any concessions from Pyongyang or Washington remains unclear. We'll explore that question in just a bit after this from Lee Jae-in.
Very happy. Those were the words U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo used to describe how he feels about his return to North Korea this weekend to continue denuclearization talks with the regime. During a news conference at the State Department on Wednesday, the top U.S. diplomat said he was very happy to be going back to get another chance to continue to advance the commitment that the leaders of North Korea and the U.S. made back in their June summit in Singapore. Pompeo also expressed optimism about the process that's underway.
I'm optimistic that we'll come away from that with better understandings, deeper progress, and a plan forward.
Pompeo declined to comment on recent negative signals from the North, including complaints about Washington's apparent reluctance to agree to a declaration to end the Korean War without major concessions. This comes after North Korea's Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho said last weekend there was no way the regime would disarm first without seeing trust-building measures from the U.S. Pompeo also brushed aside suggestions there's a difference of opinion between himself and President Trump over a timeline for North Korea to ditch its nuclear program. Just last month, Pompeo expressed hope there would be major North Korean disarmament by the end of Trump's first term in January 2021. But a week later, President Trump said he did not have a time frame. Pompeo stressed that in the meantime, international sanctions have to remain in place on North Korea, and added there was unanimous support for the continued sanctions at the recent UN General Assembly. Pompeo's fourth trip to the North Korean capital on Sunday will be all the more important as the U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun, will make his first trip there as well. Lee Jae-in, Arirang News.
Now, for a further look at what to expect from Pompeo's trip to Pyongyang, we have with us Dr. Woo Jung-yup from the Sejong Institute. Thank you for coming on the show today.
My pleasure.
So it has finally been confirmed that Pompeo will be going back to Pyongyang on Sunday. It will be just a one-day trip, but he is scheduled to meet with Kim Jong-un. What should we expect from this trip? I mean, what should our level of expectations be from this trip?
So it's just a little over a month since that U.S. government canceled his visit last August. So we have to see what has been developed during that time frame. First, we have Inter-Korean Summit in early September. Then there was a UN General Assembly in which a lot of bilateral meetings took place. So I think that there has been some progress with regard to the improving the relations between the U.S. and North Korea. And I think that part of the discussion is about how to improve the negotiation between the United States and the North Korea with regard to North Korea's nuclear weapons. So I think that the first goal of the visit by Secretary Pompeo this time is to confirm the second summit between Trump and Kim Jong-un. And he also mentioned during the presser yesterday that the purpose of his visit is not only for the going forward with the summit, but also to deepen the understanding, mutual understanding for the denuclearization process. So I think that the U.S. has put the efforts to continue the negotiation with North Korea, and this visit reflects U.S. efforts for that and North Korea's willingness to be engaged in the discussion with the United States.
Do you think that we will get some sort of time, date, location about a possible Kim-Trump summit?
We don't know yet, but considering the last summit in June 12th, the date and the location was announced on May 11th, which is about a month before the summit. So many people discussed the possibility of having summit before the U.S. general election, which will take place in November 6th.
You mean the local, the midterm elections?
Yeah, midterm elections. So now we have less than 1 month left. So for the summit to take place before the midterm elections, now we are talking about like 20 or 25 days. So unless we have a fixed date and location at this this time visit by Secretary Pompeo to North Korea, I think it's physically almost impossible to have a meeting before the midterm election in November. But nobody knows. So maybe we can have some announcement of the date and location after his trip this time.
So yes, we'll have to see on that. Another big possible outcome from this could be some sort of agreement towards a declaration to end the Korean War. I mean, it's something that North Korea has very much been pushing for. Do you think that the US are ready to give any kind of concession on that part?
I think it's very unlikely that both countries have reached that kind of agreement since the cancellation of Secretary Pompeo's visit in last August. Because Secretary Pompeo publicly announced after the Inter-Korean Summit and before the UN General Assembly that he would meet North Korean diplomat Ri Yong-ho. And also, U.S. government publicly invite North Korea to the Wien, Austria, to have a meeting with Special Representative Steve Biegun of the U.S. government. But Steve Biegun yesterday did not mention that there was no meeting between him and the North Korean counterpart. So from that, I think that there has been no serious negotiation between U.S. government and North Korean government with regard to the nuclear program of North Korea. So I think it's very unlikely that maybe they can discuss, but it's very difficult for them to produce an outcome to finalize the deal which involves the declaration to end the war.
Biegun, as you said, is accompanying Secretary of State Pompeo to this trip to Pyongyang. Does his inclusion suggest at least that we can hope for some sort of progress on the details for denuclearization?
I think that's what U.S. government is hoping for. So in July visit by Secretary Pompeo, he was accompanied by so-called working group within the State Department, who are composed of Ambassador Sung Kim and two Deputy Assistant Secretary within the State Department to have a negotiation with North Korea. But North Korea did not respond to the demand by the U.S. government to have a working level negotiation for the denuclearization. So having Mr. Steve Biegun with his trip this time, U.S. government once again demanded North Korea answer in the same way that North Korea has to make designate the counterpart for the Mr. Biegun, and also North Korea has to compose the working group to negotiate with the U.S. government. So that is truly the U.S. government intention, but we have to see how North Korea is going to respond.
So there's a lot of we have to seize and a lot of hope this happens this way or that way. So let me ask again, where should we put our level of expectations? Do you think we can see some kind of big announcement to come from this trip, from Pompeo's trip to Pyongyang, or do we have to wait for that kind of big announcement for a possible summit between Trump and Kim?
I don't want to be too pessimistic on this, but realistically, that we have to recall that for the events involving Secretary Pompeo's visit to Pyongyang. So until August, that there was 3 visits were realized and 1 visit was canceled. And out of those 3 visits, Secretary Pompeo met Chairman Kim 2 times, and 2 times all before the first summit between Trump and Kim. So after Singapore, when Secretary Pompeo tried to demand a negotiation with North Korea in July, he could not meet Chairman Kim. And in August, U.S. once again tried to push the negotiation with North Korea, and the trip was even canceled. So I think the meeting with the Chairman Kim might be the signal that this time they are not going to seriously discuss about the denuclearization process. So probably they are going to more focus on the confirmation of the second summit between Trump and Kim Jong-un. So I think that it's less likely that we are going to see the major outcomes with regard to the denuclearization process of North Korea.
Now, what's interesting in this timing as well, there's a Washington Post report which came out with an interview with South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa, and in it they talk about North Korea's denuclearization plans, but she says very strongly that perhaps a different approach is needed from the past. She cites examples from the Bush era and saying that previous kind of negotiations broke down and that there are similar risks if Pompeo, the US, asked for a nuclear inventory, a list of nuclear weapons as such, from the North Korea at this point right now. She also called for action and corresponding measures from the US or both sides for there to be sufficient trust. Now, these statements are quite bold. Why do you think she has come out and said them now like this?
So I think that is Minister Kang's effort to make the progress between North Korea and the United States. And I think it also shows the frustration from the South Korean government because there's a very heavy fluctuations in the relations between US and North Korea because of the denuclearization process always blocks the improving the relations between two countries. So I think that Minister Kang and our Minister of Foreign Affairs knows the necessity of having declaration of the list of North Korea for the ultimate denuclearization process of North Korea. But I think the reason why Minister Kang proposed the idea of holding off the demanding the list is to patch up this time for the deteriorating relations between the Koreas and move forward in the future, so we can have discussions on the declaration of the list of North Korea.
Now, before Pompeo goes to Pyongyang, he'll first be stopping by in Tokyo, and then after Pyongyang, he'll be coming to Seoul and then Beijing as well. Now, we've received word that the North Korean official has also gone to Beijing. The timing seems just before this Pompeo meeting as well. So where does all this, these countries' relationships play into this as well? What does Pompeo and the US and China and North Korea, what will they all be wanting from each other, do you think? So
whenever Secretary Pompeo paid a visit to Pyongyang, Tokyo is always the stop for his flight. So I think that the thing that outstands this time is visiting China after his visit to Pyongyang. US and China has currently experiencing very heavy trade wars between two countries, and US acknowledged that China's role is very important in enforcing the sanctions on North Korea. So it's very difficult for US government to balance the imposing sanctions and also having trade wars with China at the same time. So as a top diplomat of the US government, Secretary Pompeo tries to consult and persuade Chinese government that this is the way that both countries can improve their relations. At the same time, they can achieve the mutual goal of denuclearizing North Korea.
Now, one more piece of news that I'd like to discuss with you before we go. So 160 South Koreans, including some government officials, are currently in North Korea, taking part in a joint anniversary event for the October 4th declaration. That was the declaration signed between Roh Moo-hyun and Kim Jong-il in 2007. So what do you make of this event? And do you think there's anything that can come out of this event as well?
So this is more of a very symbolic event in 11 years because of the cold relations between two Koreas for the past 9 or 10 years. We couldn't have this ceremony for 11 years. So I think it's very important for two Koreas further improving the relations. And also our Minister of Unification is visiting Pyongyang. So I think his counterpart is going to welcome him and greet him and having talks. So I think both ministers with regard to the improving the inter-Korean relations can have further talks in how to implement Panmunjom and Pyongyang Declaration to improve the inter-Korean relations.
I mean, what would that look like though? What kind of inter-Korean relations improvements can we do? What is the next step?
So I think currently, because of the sanctions imposed on North Korea, there is a limit. How further we can go with regard to the economic projects. But there are a lot of areas like family reunion, because in Pyongyang Declaration, both countries agreed to have permanent places for the family reunion. So I think that's the one area that the two ministers can agree further on the issues.
That's all we have time for. Thank you for coming in today, and we look forward to your insights next week. Hopefully, when you can come back and tell us more about, the results from the Pompeos meeting with Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang, and this meeting, this event from North Korea with the October 4th declaration event as well.
Thank you.
That is where we close our show, but stay tuned to Arirang for our later newscast for the latest updates from Korea and around the world as well. Thank you for watching, and hope you can join us again next time. Goodbye.